Welcome to Stepping on the Mat podcast, episode 011 with me, Aaron Martinez. Today's guest is a talented and humble man loved by many on and off the wrestling mat. He has far too many accomplishments to list in a short hour. But to name a few, he has been inducted as a Hall of Famer and has been on a rampage of success as head coach at Grandview University for the past 12 years. With 11 NAIA team titles and named Coach of the Year multiple times, it has become a question of many, what will he do next? He has mentored and guided many college wrestlers to their dreams of becoming All-Americans and national champions. Not only has he produced outstanding wrestlers, but he has also shaped and prepared young men, molding them into tough, resilient, and honest leaders. He is a loving father, husband, and God-fearing man. He has been personally connected to my story over the years and unknowingly inspired me to always raise the bar and to do so for my students so that they can become the best version of themselves. And for that, I'm forever grateful. Ladies and gentlemen, my honored guest, Coach Nick Mitchell. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Like the intro right there.
Yeah, it was long. Yeah. Well, if I had to list all of your accolades, I think we'd probably spend an hour just running through them, and I know that you probably wouldn't like that at all. So man, tell me what's been going on. It's been a busy month for wrestling in July, so Tell me what's been going on with you.
Yeah, I just got back from the National Wrestling Coaches Association Coaches Convention down in Florida. It was kind of a whirlwind, actually. The Wednesday before that, Coach Reedy, my head assistant coach, and I went to Tulsa, Oklahoma. We flew out that morning, did the high school coaches clinic down there. So we just go and show like an hour of technique to just coaches, and then taught coaching for about an hour, and then got on a plane and flew back. Then the next day flew down to Florida for the coaches convention, came back Saturday night. And then Monday morning, had to drive down to Kansas City. We had our conference coaches meeting. So this time of year is like nuts with that kind of stuff. And then, it's like one thing after another, but it's good. I like doing that stuff.
Yeah. So like, how's that feel for you now? Like, like you've been in the driver's seat of the coach's position, and then you get asked to come do these coaching mentor events, and I know people have got their eyes on you and really want to pick your brain. So
yeah, it's actually like one of my favorite things to do. I would actually prefer doing like coaching other coaches over doing like clinics for youth and high school kids. Like I love doing that also, but I think like you can make a bigger difference almost when you're like coaching other coaches, because obviously they're going to go out, and it's exponential. And so that's really one of my favorite things, is just like helping people that like are fired up about the same thing I am, so I actually really enjoy doing that.
Well, I think the impacts are great when you can do that. Like in the military, when we would do like leadership drills like that, it would be like, I looked at it like, if I can impact this one person because he's on a team, he's going to impact 40 people. For sure. And then that ladder keeps going and going and going. Yep. So you're busy with coaching stuff like that and doing some of those training camps. What's life been like with the family during that time? I know it takes a lot for you to get your schedule set, and then even coming here and doing this is another hour out of your time.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's crazy. So my girls are 12 and 9, and so especially the 12-year-old, I mean, it's like nonstop with sports. I mean, she does cheer, she does competitive cheer, she does softball, volleyball, and then she's got like her church stuff going on. And then our youngest is like, she does all the other sports, like she's soccer, basketball, and then volleyball is going to be the only thing I think that they both do. And so this time of year, it's like slow down for a little bit, and then in a couple of weeks it's all going to pick up again. So it's like you kind of take advantage of while you can. And it's funny because most normal families go on vacation like in the wintertime. They try to get out of it. Well, I can't. It's right in the middle of the season. So our vacations are in the summer, which everybody's going on vacation then too. But we're like the only people that don't do anything in the winter. And so we travel when we can. And so you go see some family or go on a little family vacation, and it's usually pretty short turnaround. And then we're back to sports and work and everything else. So
yeah. So where'd you guys do this summer for
this
vacation?
year? We just went to Chicago. Actually, the girls hadn't been there, and so we did the whole hit it all up. Did the Shed Aquarium, Took him to a Cubs game, which is definitely the highlight. That was cool. So yeah, it was good. And we did like the river boat cruise, all the like touristy stuff that everybody does when they go to Chicago. And it was cool. I mean, we're trying to like hit some of, it's funny because my wife, like her family grew up, when she was growing up, like they were like the freaking Brady Bunch. Like they did every family vacation, everything, like they had some money, like, and so she's been everywhere. And she's like, "You've never been here?" And I'm like, "Man, I grew up and we didn't have a lot of money. And so we just went to wrestling tournaments. So all my vacations, like we went to Florida for the Junior Olympics. Like that was their big thing, So it wasn't like, I had never been to like Mount Rushmore, and she's like, "You can't believe you haven't been to Mount Rushmore." I was like, "Well, you're the freaking Cleaver family." So it was different. So it's cool. So I'm seeing it for the first time with my girls too.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. It's because, you're giving me another perspective. See, when we were kids and we wrestled, I was the little kid that didn't have his parents, supporting him and all that stuff. And I always looked at you. I was like, man, he's got like the perfect parents. I bet they go on a lot of vacations together.
Yeah, just wrestling. That was it.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of when you were a kid, let's go back to the beginning, like, and kind of give us a rundown of your origin story.
Yeah. So like, as far as the wrestling part goes, it's interesting because I grew up, I would say it's a wrestling family, but nobody was really that successful. Like I had an uncle he was a wrestler, but he actually played football in college, and he never qualified for state or anything like that. So, at the time I thought he was pretty good, but looking back, I'm like, well, he wasn't really, he wasn't a great wrestler, but he got me into it, and so he was part of it. My dad, who is actually my stepdad. And so
interesting. See, I'm learning a lot today.
Yeah. So my mom had me really young. She was like 18 when I was born. And so, my dad, my real dad, actually, he was in California for a long time. He's back here now, and we've reconnected over the years. And so we have a good relationship.
Yeah, God bless that.
Yeah. But my stepdad, he was a wrestler too, but he was more of a troublemaker than a wrestler. So I think he maybe got kicked off the team in high school eventually. And so, but he had a wrestling background. And so it was just, for me, it was like what I wanted to do. I mean, I was just naturally, I was super aggressive. Like I loved wrestling. So I wrestled. I started going to a couple tournaments in like first grade, second grade, and then third grade. I remember going to a tournament in Des Moines, and I got beat, a couple times, but I remember seeing this club that was there, and it was the Des Moines Lincoln Club.
Yeah.
And they just had a whole group of people, and I was just there with me and my parents, and, not doing real well. And so we were kind of like, all right, you gotta start like practicing, for real, not just wrestling your parents in the living room. And so that was my connection. So in fourth grade, I started going to that club, and I definitely jumped a level during that time because I loved it, but I think that club, that one thing they did a great job of was they really taught just solid basics. And that's kind of how I've always been ever since then, is that's how I coach now. That's what I think is like the most like important fundamental part of wrestling. And so I started wrestling with that club and the Des Moines Lincoln Club, and I wrestled a ton of matches. I think my fourth grade year I wrestled like 54 matches.
Yeah.
But it wasn't because like my parents were pushing me to do it. I just wanted to. Every weekend I was like, where are we going? And so I was fortunate that my parents, like they pushed me, but only when I had a negative attitude, or only when I was like kind of being a baby, they'd be hard on me. But it was never about like, they weren't hard on me because I lost. They weren't pushing me to do more than I wanted to do. It was more, they were trying to hold me back a little bit. So it was the perfect situation.
Yeah. So fourth grade. So when did you start noticing that, like, in like what grade did you start noticing that you were starting to like really take this on and you were a name to be known?
Yeah. So that year, like, that fourth grade year, I ended up like wrestling at like every tournament, throughout the year. And then I went to the AAU state that year, and I got second place. I got beat a guy named Corey.
That's a pretty big jump. I mean, not for doing that and getting second.
Yeah. And I remember, so I wrestled this guy, Corey Stanley, who a lot of people that from that era probably would remember. He was from Wilton. He ended up wrestling at the University of Iowa. He ended up being a couple times state champ in high school. But the funny thing is that what I remember from that match is he had two different color wrestling shoes on. And that was like, he beat me before the match started. I was like, dude, this guy has to be so good.
He's got to be so good.
He's got two different shoes on, man. Like, what do I do about this? And he just like kicked my butt. Like, I got beat bad. but I knew, at that point it was like, okay, this is like the goal. I want to, go for state titles, and I wanted to be great. And so from then on, every year I wrestled, and it got more and more serious. And I think probably after maybe 6th grade, I started like getting into some freestyle stuff, which again was almost kind of on my own, just going to tournaments and trying to figure it out as I went. And then eventually, like, I think in 8th grade, I started, Mike Land had a club. So Mike Land wrestled for Iowa State, and he was one of the first ones. Now there's so many clubs.
Yeah, there is.
We didn't really have anything like that when we were growing up, and he had this thing going, and I started going to it. And for me, that was another level jump, because he was, I would say, like, at the Des Moines Lincoln Club, they were kind of ahead of their time, because their basics were so good, but they talked a lot about like just being like mentally tough, which it was like just the idea of like believing that you could win. But when I went to Land's gym, he took it a step further, where we did visualization, we did affirmations. I mean, it was the first time that I was really taught like how that worked and what that meant.
Right.
And that was big for me, just getting into that next stage of it is like, just, it's that fine line between being, super confident and arrogant, it's just being like, dude, I know I can win, and like telling yourself this all the time. Yeah. And so it was like a real like concentrated effort on the mental side of things. And so that was big too.
Yeah. Coach Lewis over at Lincoln, he came from military background, so it was no wonder why he had that kind of the basics,
right,
fundamentals,
yep,
get it done, right?
For sure.
But that mental mindset with like affirmations and like going to that deeper space in your mind, to fill those voids with like positive affirmations. Yeah. I actually got a hold of that when I went to Jay Robinson's wrestling camp.
Yeah.
He had us all lay on the mat and take us through a visual experience to like be able to know how to tap into it, at least, right, to be able to create those things. Yeah. Instead of like you were saying, I seen the guy with the 2 different shoes, and now you're affirming that right, this guy's so much better than you.
It's gotta be, right?
That's so awesome.
Yep.
So moving from there, so you got into, you're moving from junior high and into high school now. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So we, my family, we lived in Des Moines. We were actually like in the Hoover school district. So I grew up in the Beaverdale area. Hoover didn't have a strong program, and it was like a kind of a big mystery in 8th grade to where I was going to go to high school.
Yeah.
So
same.
It was kind of funny, because, that was when like open enrollment was still, you could open enroll. We didn't know, but what was going to happen. Obviously I grew up in the Lincoln Club, and so we considered going to Lincoln. Maybe Hoover was sort of an option, and then we talked about moving, and my family ended up moving to Johnston. And so we moved to Johnston, and at the time, like, that was for me was a strange move, because I grew up in the Des Moines School District, which was really diverse. So I was at Meredith Middle School, which was connected to Hoover. Pretty much my whole elementary, middle school career, I'd been around a really diverse group, and then I went to Johnston, and it was not diverse. At that time, it was pretty small. I mean, in wrestling, there's 3 classes, and we were still 2A my freshman year. I think it was a really white school, and obviously I'm a white guy, but going to just that change was weird.
Yeah, I know Meredith. I work over in those areas with the church over there, so I know what kind of kids are in that neighborhood. For sure.
And so it was just it was so strange for me at first. But it was a good situation as far as we had a good wrestling program, and there was a lot of people kind of in my boat that were moving into that school district. Johnston was really blowing up at the time.
Yeah, you guys had a pretty stacked team from what I remember.
We did, yeah.
You had Ben Barnes.
Yep.
Ben Barnes was over at Dowling with me.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
He's actually one of my best friends still. And so, Ben Barnes was on that team. Jordan Bully. Guys, Aaron Toney, was real tough. We just had a good, solid group. And then we had as a freshman, I had some seniors that, some really good leaders on that team. Brad Beeman was a state champ that year. He ended up wrestling at Northern Iowa. He had moved from Lewis Central. His dad was an assistant coach over there, and his dad was a military guy also. And just a really good, solid background. But Beeman was a guy, like, we like idolized him. He was the man. He was the best guy on the team, 160 pounder, which I wrestled 103 at the time, and I thought 160 was like 260. It just seemed so big to me. But some really good senior leadership on that team. And so we ended up, we were ranked as high as 2nd in the state that year. think we finished maybe 7th at the state tournament. But that year, that freshman year, we had, I think it was 9 state qualifiers, and I didn't qualify. I got upset at the district tournament.
Yeah, who did you lose to that year?
There's a guy from South Tama. I think his name is Jeremy Mann was his name. I beat him pretty bad during the year, and I wrestled him.
See, you had to go through it.
Yeah,
I had to go through it.
Oh man, it was brutal. I mean, it was like, I wrestled him. So that was back. It was a district tournament. I had won the sectional. It was a district tournament, and basically, you only take the top 2, and I was winning a match, and I tried to cradle him or something, and got put on my back and pinned. And I think my whole high school career, I got pinned twice. That was one time.
That was one of them.
Yeah, and that was one of them. And so of course he got beat in the finals match, and then a guy that I didn't have a chance to wrestle back then because I got 3rd, and he had already beaten me. And so, I mean, I was like, throughout my career, when I think about times when I was like crushed, that was one of them. And I remember like looking in the paper because we had one of the highest amounts of state qualifiers that year. We would have been tied for the most if I would have qualified. It's just things like that, Back then, you had like a pep assembly for like the state qualifiers, and I'm just sitting in the stands.
You're in the stands.
It was brutal, man. But it was probably good for me in the long run because I had a really good off season that year. I wrestled a ton of freestyle, and I remember like we had our weight room was open at nights that year, and I was in the weight room like every day because I was small. I mean, I only weighed 97 my freshman year, wrestling 103, and that sophomore year, then I wrestled 103 again. And I was huge, and it was actually terrible weight cut, but
yeah. I think you and Barnes both had a bad weight cut that year. I know I was cutting a lot of weight too.
Our sophomore and junior year, we were idiots. I mean, we should have been up a weight. We just didn't know, and we didn't know how to do it right. Plus, we were both still growing, and so that was high school weight cutting was far worse than college
brutal.
Weight cutting. Yeah,
it was like really, in my opinion, like from my perspective and my journey with that, it was really on my own.
Yeah,
it was
for
like
sure.
It was like, yeah, I'll just starve.
Yeah,
and my parents were like, yeah, I guess if you make weight, I mean, it's good.
Yeah, they didn't know, and I'd be eating sometimes, and they're like, "You sure you should be eating that?" Yeah, but they're, it's all we knew, and. We were dehydrated. Like if you'd wrestle on Saturday, you'd be dehydrated on Tuesday.
Exactly.
You spend 4 days just like hating life.
I remember my dad always like, "Here, eat this grapefruit."
Yeah.
I was like, "What?
Yeah,
a grapefruit?"
Yeah.
He goes, "You could put some sugar on it if you want."
Yeah. They always. That's funny too. 'Cause my dad saying he was like, "You should eat a lemon." Like they had this thing like the acidity was gonna like eat up the rest of the food in our stomach or something. I don't know where they got this stuff from. Like,
yeah. I swear, like my stepmom, she had it out for me. God rest her soul. She would always be like, it'd be like, Wednesday night, I got to make weight for Thursday. And like, she would have like pasta. And I'm like, that's my jam.
Yeah.
That's nobody else's jam. That's my jam,
Right.
but everybody's over there slurping up the spaghetti noodles.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, but it's cool. Like, so you shared your story with me about that loss at districts. Obviously I shared with you off mic here about mine, which you were there and got to witness it. Yeah. But I think that those things, like, you're exactly right. That I remember that, and it's always with me. And that's what motivates me. It keeps me going. So, for all those people listening out there, you lose a big match, it's not over. Just let that inspire you to do something great.
For sure.
So as far as inspiration goes, who would you say your biggest influence in wrestling has been? It could be, anywhere from like a family member, another wrestler, or, God, or whatever it is, who did you draw influence from?
Yeah. I mean, it was like different through different stages of my life. So like I said, I mean, early on, my uncle was a big part of it, just because he was a wrestler and he was like a huge reason why I was attracted to the sport. But then, going to that club at Lincoln, the first coach I had was Mike Reeser, who his son Brad was.
Yeah, Brad Reeser.
Yeah.
I wrestled him a couple times.
Yeah, same. And he was really, like, early on, Brad was really good.
He was really good when he was,
And that was kind of like my standard to get to, And so when I could start like hanging with him and start beating him, I knew that's part of how I knew I was getting better. But Mike was a really good youth coach. Again, like really good basics. And then of course Rick Lewis, through middle school, that guy was like such a big part of it because he was I got lucky because he was exactly like the kind of coach like I wanted and needed, because I liked coaches that were tough. you know, like, and he was
big too.
Yeah, he was big.
He's a big guy.
He's a Marine, you know, he had all these things that were like, I enjoyed as a all the way through. I wanted coaches that were like hard on me. And looking back on it now, it's kind of funny because he wasn't like that tough on us, but his persona was tough.
Yeah.
And so it was like, if he said something, I was listening, you know? And so he was a big part of it. But at the same time, like he was, you know, a really faithful guy. I remember you could never do this now, but at the end of every practice, like he prayed.
He'd pray.
He'd say pray a prayer at the end of every practice. And that was cool. You know, so that influenced me, just having somebody that I looked up to that I knew was a Christian, that was like, okay, this is cool. You know, this is okay to like follow this path. You know, and then again, the wrestling side of it, he was basics, you know, and taught us good fundamentals. And then, you know, switching into when I was in high school, it's funny because my coach was Frank Baltzley, and I would say like, it took me probably getting out of high school to look back and realize like what a good guy and what a good coach he was. And it's such a good example of this. I remember like when I was in high school, he would teach like just some basic stuff like, hey, when you sprawl, make sure you're on your shoelaces so you can slide down off the shot. And I remember him showing this and being in high school and being like, dude, this is like so dumb. You know, like, okay, you're telling me to slide down. I get it. And literally one of the very first practices in college, Coach Miller, who this guy's like a legend, ends up coaching 10 national championships, get on your shoelaces, slide down. And I remember thinking like, man, I'm an idiot. You know, like I guess my high school coach knew what he was talking about a little bit. Yeah. So, but he was like so good at, he was good at coaching for everybody on the team in high school. Like when I was in high school, Johnston always had big teams. He made it fun. Like the football guys wanted to wrestle. You know, it was like, and maybe for me, I wanted more, you know, I wanted it probably more time. I wanted more intensity, and that's not who he was. But like he wasn't my coach. He was the Johnston High School coach, and he was great at that. It just, I was selfish, you know, I just wanted something more for me. And so, so looking back, you know, that he had a huge impact. And then I had an assistant coach, Mike Halder, who he was more intense, you know, so I actually, I realized
good cop, bad cop.
Exactly.
And
it was perfect for us and what we needed, because he was super intense and, you know, he was pretty fiery. And then of course in college, you know, having Coach Miller, I mean, other than my own parents, nobody's had as much of an impact on me as he has, you know, and still does. I mean, we still talk all the time, and that guy, I mean, he totally changed my life. So that was a big one.
And I listened to another interview you was on, and you was talking about Coach Miller, and you were like hitting like a point where you were like, I don't know if I'm going to, you know, he's going to ask me to come back to this position or not. And like, you kind of hit that point. You want to kind of discuss that with us here and let us know about that?
Yeah. So realistically, I mean, my freshman year, I went in, and it was such a difference for me. I mean, in high school, I was always a starter. I was always varsity. And so like, I never had to like fight for my spot really, you know? And so I go to college, and part of why I went to Wartburg was because I knew it was going to be tough. You know, I knew if I wasn't going to wrestle Division I wanted to be at a place where they were good, and I was going to get pushed. You know, I talked to some other schools, and a lot of them were telling me, hey, if you come here, you're going to start right away. And I didn't really like that. I wanted to be at a place where when I went to Wartburg, I was either going to wrestle 26 or 34. And we had 2 returning All-Americans at both of those weight classes. And actually my freshman year, those 2 guys won national titles. And so that was part of why I went there. But I forgot that when I got there, you know, and it was hard, and I wasn't the guy, and you don't feel that love. And so all of a sudden, you know, I'm back in Des Moines most weekends, like seeing my high school girlfriend, you know, just it's stupid. You know, I wasn't really bought in, but then I'm also like, oh man, why am I not getting what I want?
Sure.
Well, there was a reason for that. So kind of fast forward, you know, that year, I think there was like maybe 6 of us at our weight class, and I beat a lot of those guys throughout the year. And then coming back the next year, you know, I'm hoping I can be the guy. Well, the funny thing is when I come back, I'm like the only guy at the weight class. Like between graduation and some guys quitting and getting hurt or whatever, I come back and I'm kind of like the starter by default to start the year. But looking back now, I guarantee Coach Miller was like, he was looking for a new solution. You know, he probably didn't have faith in me at the time, and he shouldn't have. But early that year, I remember like sitting in practice, and he was talking to the team, and it was the first time I heard him say it, and I know he probably said it a million times, but it was the first time I heard him say, like, hey man, every day there's going to be things that you don't feel like doing, but it doesn't matter how you feel. Regardless of what you feel, you just do it anyway. And it was so simple, but it was like so profound to me at that point. It was just like, just stop thinking about like how you feel and just do what needs to be done. And like automatically changed my mindset. And literally, like, there's not too many things I think in life you can look back on and be like, that day I changed for the rest of my life, but that day I changed forever. And I can remember after that, like being in my college, I lived off campus that year, and like we had this dirty old brown couch, like sitting on this couch and being like, it's like 9 o'clock, and 9 o'clock was when I was going to get my extra workout in, and feeling like, man, I don't really feel like doing this right now. And all of a sudden, like, that was my motivation. Like, not feeling like doing something became my motivation to do it. And so because I recognized it, and so all of a sudden things change. And, fast forward, and I go from, I think my freshman year, I had to go to JV conference, which was terrible. And I got like third at JV conference, or fourth or something. I don't know. Coach Miller says I got fourth. I think maybe I got third, but either way, just JV conference. I mean, there's nothing to brag about. I didn't win. I know that. And after JV conference, like, he was going to yell at me. My dad beat him to it, so he like let me off the hook. I didn't need two guys yelling at me. And then he fast forward to that sophomore year, and I finished third in the country that year. And I got a lot better, but I also like just mindset, it was just work ethic, all of it. And so a lot of that was attributed to him, and the things that he instilled in me that year. But that was a game-changing, life-changing season for me.
Yeah. These legacies of words that stick with us over time, just like these losses that always seem to motivate us. I want to kind of jump into a different area here, which is, what challenges are you facing now investing into your job, which we know is like, it's a lot, right?
Sure.
How do you balance that as a father and as a husband as you move into these timelines?
Yeah. Well, I think some of it's so funny, like how all this stuff like plays in together, because number one, all those losses, the loss my freshman year, my losses in high school, college, in high school I finished third, fourth, and third in the state. College I finished third, second, and third in the country. So that's like depressing, when you look at it, like being that close to accomplishing your goal and not getting there. And so using those lessons as a coach has made such a huge difference for me. And then when you start thinking the same thing, like in your personal life, where you can call it a loss when you screw up, when you have a day where I'm just a jerk because I'm in a bad mood, or I'm like bringing home my mood from work and and being crabby to everybody at the house. That's a loss, And so if you recognize it, and it's like, okay, I have to like improve on this, and try to make a change. And so that's part of it. And that's a way harder process, for me at least, because you are who you are, and it's like, you want to be this way, but I'm just wired this way. And so it's like, man, just like constant work. And so a lot of that to me is the only way for me to improve in those areas is like, I have to constantly keep surrounding myself with things that can help, whether it's what I'm reading, what I'm listening to, what I'm watching, and then it's like, it gets better, and then you go back and but I think that's just what life is. It's not a constant like improvement all the time. And I think people make that mistake sometimes, whether it's, it's their diet or their exercise routine or whatever. And they feel like if it's not always going great, they just give up on it. And it's okay to feel like, hey, sometimes I'm like, it's moving along, and then I kind of fall back. Well, then I move along, and 2 steps forward and 1 step back isn't ideal, but sometimes it's still going forward in the long run. So that's kind of how I approach it, and then within my coaching, we preach championship lifestyle all the time. And then it's a reminder like, hey, you can't just preach it, you have to live it, and so trying to do that with my family, and, and then there's just day-to-day things where I learned early in my coaching career, like, okay, if I tell my wife I'm going to be home at 8 o'clock, be home at 8. And usually I have to give myself a cushion. So if I really think I'm going to be home at 7:30, say 8 o'clock.
Right.
It's just like anything else. Let's under promise and over perform, So just little things like that, that you learn over time.
Yeah, man. Excellent. So that kind of leads in my next question here. You talk about the championship lifestyle. Now, how do you, for yourself or for your athletes, how do you convert that belief system, right? The affirmations of saying it as a belief system into the actual result?
Yeah. So I think the number one is we talk about it all the time, in some way, shape, or form. Meaning like, I just talked about like Coach Miller talks about doing it anyway. Well, that discussion, weekly, monthly, whatever it is, understanding what it means to do it anyway, that's part of a championship lifestyle, and so then we'll talk about doing more, so doing more just means like an obvious recipe for success is you put in more work than other people. You do more of the right things. People want to like get more. They want to fast forward to that part. But to get more, you have to be more. And to be more, you have to do more. And so you have to back it up to like, dude, you do more than everyone else and you do more than everyone else. And then pretty soon you become more and then you'll get more. And so it's like helping these guys understand like what these things are, it's all part of that championship lifestyle, but so much goes into it. And we tell recruits that when they come visit, like, hey, number one, if you come here, you have to buy into this. Number two, you're going to hear me talk about it all the time, and we do. And so when they come, they already know what the expectation is. And then you talk about it, but you keep showing them like what examples are. And I really think like the most important part of our practice every day is before practice starts. Every day, these guys come in, they sit in the bleachers, and at 4:00, I usually have some kind of message for them. And some days it's just, hey, here's the schedule. Here's what's going on. We're going to take off tomorrow at 4:00, whatever. But typically it's something that relates to that. And it might be something as simple as, hey, I've got a list of 8 guys that haven't turned in their financial aid paperwork yet. But then there's another lesson with that. Take care of your business.
Yeah.
When things need to get done, get it done. Don't wait. Don't put
Yeah,
it
you're
off.
going to alleviate stress down the road.
Exactly.
With that. Yeah, for sure.
And so it's these things. Or of course, there's you get an email that somebody missed class. And there's another lesson. And it's not just about missing class, but you want to win a national title, but you think it's hard to walk to class. If you think that's hard, you're not going to win anything.
Yeah. You're not going to make the walk out today.
Right, for sure. And so those are the lessons that go into that. And so it's not even, I would say, like some of our guys will say, oh, what's your motivational talk going to be today? It's not really, it is, but it's more about, these are life lessons. This is how you do life successfully.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a reminder that all these things, when we say championship lifestyle, yes, of course, it's going to make you better at wrestling. And that's part of our goal. But this is the thing that's supposed to stick with you when you leave. Because when you get done here, whether you win a title or not, that's going to wear off pretty quick. And realistically, 99% of the world's not going to know or care. But what they're going to care about is like, how do you live every day? And the other part is when you look back at your college career, if you did win a title, but you don't live the lifestyle, you're actually not going to be that proud of it. It's not going to feel that good. The thing that you're proud of at the end of the year the winning is great, but it's what it took to get there. Right. It's the sacrifice, it's the discipline. Those are the things that you really feel proud of. And so it's hard to get like college guys to think about that at the time, but again, like it has to be repeated all the time. And I think, again, my story is such a good reminder of that, because I know Coach Miller said do it anyway, probably 600 times my freshman year. I didn't hear it one time. Yeah, and then finally my sophomore year, I heard it at some point, and so that's why repetition is real key.
Yeah. And we hear these catchphrases like embrace the process. Like what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So, it's funny because we do, like, you hear they're kind of like cliche things, but I think it's also important to like, okay, let's not just say it, but let's talk about what that means. And it is like the process is, maybe we, like, you hear people say, I love the grind or whatever, but it is like, embrace it, love it, like enjoy what's hard, like, and so like one of the things we talk about is like the hard way is the easy way. Mm-hmm. And that's just a different way to say the same thing, but it's like, by doing what's hard now, you're going to make things easier for yourself on down the road. And that came up in like a rear standing situation, like when a guy stands up to his feet and you're behind him, the hard thing to do is like pick him up and freaking drop him hard.
Right.
But the easy thing to do is to try to like sag and pull him. Well, that creates a scramble usually. So do it the hard way, and then things will get easier. Well, that's the same thing with everything else in life. Working out is hard, but it's going to make life easier on down the road when you're healthy and you're not going to the doctor all the time. So again, it's just like, that's the process. And so understanding, here's the process. The process is the process. You have to like understand that like, that means you have to eat right, and really defining what the process is. I think that's the other thing. We just expect them to know sometimes. And that's a mistake too.
True.
Right? Like we can break it down. Here's really what should happen. Like you need to eat right. We've got a nutritionist. If you want to work with him, you should, but you don't have to. You should get a couple extra drills in a week. You need to be on your lifts every week. You should get your extra lift in on your own. You probably should do something after practice every night. You have to do your homework every day. You have to set aside time to do your homework. I mean, we can break it down and like, here it is. You should plan your day. You should know every minute of the day, here's what's going to happen, including like, here's my free time. You don't have to plan what your free time is going to be, but you should plan, here's my downtime, here's my free time, here's my recovery time, and then stick to that, So it's like, I would say it's not easy, but it's simple. It's not that complicated.
Yeah. It's interesting how many people wake up in the morning and have no plan for their day.
Right.
They're just kind of like on an autopilot. I would encourage everybody to, when they wake up, get yourself some prayer, but also like you're saying, have a plan so you know what to expect throughout the day.
For sure.
So facilities over at Grandview, I know, we had the wrestling room up there, and then you guys got moved over to the bowling alley. Maybe walk us through, kind of how that facility got put together, and then what some of the things that you guys have there.
Yeah. So, it's kind of funny because when I interviewed at Grandview, they were building the wrestling room. And the funny thing is, I think wrestling happened at Grandview on accident. I mean, they were starting football, and which meant they had.
You said they started both the same year, right?
Yeah. And so, but football had like a full year to recruit before they started. So I think when they decided to start football, they realized they needed to build like a good, legit weight room. And so they were doing that, which meant they had space above the weight room, and they didn't know what they were going to do with it. They're like, well, we could just start wrestling. And so we were kind of like an accident, I think. And so on my interview, they were building the wrestling room, and I remember my athletic director showed me, and he's like, yeah, what do you think? And of course I'm on an interview, so I'm like, it looks great, man. Let's go. And
this is perfect.
Yeah,
this is perfect.
Exactly. But I'm thinking like, this is pretty small. So, I mean, it was about a mat and a half. It actually probably even less, because at the beginning they had this big storage area. And so after the first year, they let us knock a wall down. And when I say us, it was like literally me and some guys on the team. Like we knocked a wall down and just like hauled all the block out of there. But that gave us like a couple more circles. It wasn't anything crazy. So we had about a mat and a half, and we were in there for from 2000. The 08-09 season was the first year. We were in there till I think 2015, and so we won our first 4 titles in that room. And some of that, like we number one, like I just made a decision early, like we were never going to use anything as an excuse. I mean, we were never going to use being a young team as an excuse. Our facility, we weren't going to use as an excuse. The coaches, like the team locker room was small. These guys, by the time we moved out of there, we had probably like 55 guys on the team, and there was maybe like 4 showers and like 20 of those half lockers. The coach's locker room was actually a bathroom. There was like a bathroom that has a shower in it. And so we had these like little blue like foot lockers that we hung on the wall. And it was super awkward because, you're like waiting for somebody to shower and everyone's like standing around in their towel. Well, it's like a public bathroom. So like somebody would come in and there's like 4 random dudes standing around in towels. Can you imagine? You just walk, you're like, whoa, what's going on in here? People just walk in.
I'm having a meeting in here.
Yeah, exactly. So that was great. But we just, never, it was no excuse, no complaining about it. But at the same time, it was like, okay, once we knew that we needed something different, let's figure out a solution, and my athletic director is big on that. I know he really like preaches, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. You
Yeah.
know? And that's how I always was like, okay, what's it going to take for me to get a full-time assistant? What's it going to take? What do I need to do to get a new wrestling room? What do we, you know? And so after being in there, we got to the point where we were doing split practice because we had so many guys, you know, which wasn't ideal. And finally, we started looking at some different options on campus, and there just wasn't, we're kind of landlocked there. And then the old AMF bowling alley, which used to be the biggest bowling alley in Iowa, they shut down, and it was for sale. And it was for sale for pretty cheap too. And so they brought us down there and looked at it. And of course, at the time, it's just an old bowling alley, you know, and you're like, I don't know how this is going to work. And it doesn't seem like the best, you know, you got low ceilings and it smells like cigarettes in there and, you know, whatever. So eventually they showed us some plans of what it could look like. And the other thing was it's about a half mile down the road off campus, just north of us. And at the time I wasn't sure if I would really like that either. But it turns out that's part of one of the things I really love, because it really is, at least our section is just our facility. You know, we've got 4 full mats in there, and they're 45 by 45. So we've got 8,100 square feet of just wrestling area. Plus, room for, we have 2 big sections of bleachers outside of that area. Outside of that area, we have all of our bikes and cardio stuff. So we've got a really good situation, you know, as far as space goes. We've got our own training room down there. We've got a conference room, another office that our guys will use for like study time, or our GAs will use sometimes. And then like a little lounge area, team locker room, coach's locker room. So it ended up being great, you know. And then being off campus I love, just because we're not like, I don't feel like we're ever in the way. We can just do our thing whenever we need to, you know. And then it's easy. Like if other outside groups want to come in and use it or rent it, then we can do that pretty much anytime. So
yeah, I was there for the Grandview camp. They had the duels over there.
Yeah.
My son wrestled over there. So that was the first time I've been in the facility, even though I went to Grandview.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's good. I know you probably have some moments where you're like, I kind of like them. I kind of miss the old grind in the old room, though.
So we actually once a year, we practice in the old room.
Beautiful.
So we'll have the girls practice in our room, and because now that's our old room is our women's wrestling room.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask that. So when did the women's program come in to play?
So they've had wrestling now for 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah, and they finished 3rd in the country this past year. And so their coach, Angelo Crinzi, he wrestled for us. So he was kind of like part of the growth of our program. So he kind of saw what that looked like, trying to build something. And he's done a great job. I mean, they're going to have over 40 girls next year. And so they're kind of getting to that point now, too, where they're starting to outgrow it. But
yeah, I just seen that Bella Perselli came on, so that's cool.
Yeah, she's going to be good. She's good already. She's going to be tough. So good local
awesome.
girl for sure. Yep. But we just bought all the land down by our that AMF bowling alley. So right now on the other side of the building, like golf has some nets set up, and you know, our softball and baseball team has some things. Our shooting sports teams, they meet down there. So that it's getting utilized, but they're going to start looking at like renovating that whole thing. And then Grandview just bought like,
so you guys own that
acres.
Whole footprint then?
Yeah. So it's like 15 acres. So
that's awesome.
It goes all the way to that Quick Trip behind all the strip mall and everything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they're talking about, nothing's for sure yet, but we're talking about building a new football stadium for our football team, like an indoor area too. So we'd have a full size indoor track for the track team. So if we can, we're just looking at right now, like what's the viability of doing the fundraising and some of that stuff. And once we get that figured out, they're going to move forward, and it's going to be cool.
Yeah. Cause the football team is over at East, right?
Yep.
They use the East football field, and you guys use where do you guys use for your meets?
So we compete on campus.
On campus?
In SISM. Yep. So we compete there. But yeah, they go down to East, and it's good. I mean, they redid the field turf when they started. They put in a new scoreboard. They built new locker rooms. I mean, they've done a lot for that. But again, they just want their own thing, you know, their own facility, so that we wouldn't have to share. And obviously, as our campus continues to grow, it's nice to have something, you know, that's ours right there on campus too.
Yeah. And so you were speaking about fundraising. We know nobody likes to fundraise, but it is super important.
Right.
So you guys got a fundraising event coming up. You guys got your annual golf outing, right?
Yeah.
You maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's coming up August 12th. It's one of those, I have a love-hate relationship with the golf outing, because it's like, a lot of work going into it. It's kind of stressful. It doesn't need to be, but I get a little bit stressed about it. But our other coaches like do a great job of helping us fundraise for it. And it looks, I mean, we're going to be full. I mean, we've been full the last few years. We get tons of good sponsors. So, yeah, man, we're excited about it.
So it's a 4-on-4.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Four-man best shot, 4-person best shot. So, yeah, it's a fun event. So now it's cool because we get a lot of alumni. I mean, we did it the very first year before we even had an official season. And it's kind of fun to look back at that year because I think we had maybe 11 groups or something, and now we'll have 36. I mean, it'll be full, and so you get a bunch of alums. You get people that have come. I mean, I've got some connections through my dad of people that have come every year. Guys from Liberty Ready Mix and PLS. Some these guys are like, they've supported it since the beginning, and it's cool that they really, some of them have a little tie with Grandview. Some of them are East Side guys too, and so they like to support it. But some of them are just connections, of connections that come and support it. So it's a really fun group.
Yeah. Speaking of alumni, I remember when I graduated Grandview, we had the alumni dinner.
Yeah.
And I got the 10 under 10 award, and it was, I'm kind of like you. Like, I've kind of put personal awards aside. I kind of focus on other people. So I was honored to take that award, but it was super cool that you were the main speaker that night, which was super awesome, man. It couldn't have been any better.
I was telling my wife about that because she was like, "What's this podcast you're doing?" And so I was like, "Remember that thing?" Because how long ago was that?
That was 2015?
Probably, yeah. It's been a while, huh?
15, 18, something like that. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. It feels like.
Yeah, because that's what I was telling her. I was like, that was the first time I think I spoke at that event. And it was cool that you happened to be one of the people. It was just like it was just by coincidence, basically.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I believe in coincidence.
Right.
I believe that God aligns people in certain times for certain reasons.
Yeah.
So, I took that as like, God was like reaching out to me to connect with you, for whatever reason, and it just so happened that you were the speaker that night. So cool. It couldn't have been, that was my award. It wasn't, I could have done without another award, but like that was the value for me that I took away from it. So
that's cool.
I appreciate that. So speaking of how God makes alignments, like, how has faith played a role in your life?
Yeah. So, I think the biggest thing is like, especially in my career as I've gotten older, is really just like perspective more than anything. And it's so hard, everything we do. I would say maybe not everybody, but maybe people like us, you get wrapped up in it. You just get you just dive in so head first. And, with starting the program at Grandview, it was like such a undertaking to start a program and then have like such a high expectation for what it was going to be. And so, those first few years when I wasn't getting what I wanted, it was like, you're just so invested in it. And so just like having that, I like center to go back to, what was so key for me, so early on when we weren't winning, that was so key. And then all of a sudden you win 9 straight national championships. And then the same thing. It's like, okay, well, not all of a sudden like feeling like it's all about me. That's the other part is like trying to, you talk about like giving credit away, but also like really where credit is due. Like I was given maybe some kind of gift or, whatever it is. I've always said, like, to me, like, coaching is, if you're doing it right, it's a calling, and it's definitely a calling from God. And so it's having that centerpiece to go back to again when you're winning and understanding that, hey, this isn't about me, and trying to make sure that, okay, as we're winning, what kind of difference can I make in these guys' lives? Because I heard a coach say this one time at one of the FCA camps I was at, leadership camps I was at, was, I'm not just trying to make a difference in their lives, but I'm trying to make a difference for eternity. And I'm like, dang, that's a heavy, powerful. That's a little bit of a heavy burden though too. When you're like, how do you do, because again, like, we're in a world where we're trying to be respectful of everybody, because not every guy on the team is a Christian. Not everybody, and have a diverse background and come from maybe a different, I've had Muslims and, non-believers. And so like trying to be an example of that so they know where my priority is. So that side of it. And that was like a tough thing for me to like figure out. It took a while to kind of navigate, like, how do I do this the right way, so that I'm not pushing anybody away, but I'm drawing them closer. And then, of course, after winning 9 in a row, you lose, and that was again another like devastating loss. And so then again, like perspective, and then you start winning again, and again perspective. And so more than anything, it's that, and I think it's way easier if just the focus is not making Granby Wrestling or Championship Lifestyle or me or even my family the centerpiece of my life, but make my faith the centerpiece. And then if everything else around it can be tied into that, then things will work out the way they should. So it doesn't make it, but I guess the reminder for my guys and for myself too is it doesn't mean things are going to be easier. That's the mistake, right? Is people like, man, once I buy into this lifestyle and I go down this path, then everything is going to fall into place. And it doesn't. Things still happen.
It's not written that way.
Right. No. But my wife and I were just talking about this last night. We have some friends that they've had just such a tough go at it with some family stuff and some health things.
Sure.
And I'm like, I don't know how you could survive that if you didn't have a faith. If you didn't have God to go back to, if you didn't, like, I just can't imagine, like, I think you'd be lost, you know? And so, and we were just literally talking about this last night, like without, and even, about 4 years ago, my sister passed away, and it's the same thing. Like, I don't think like you can get through something like that if you don't have, I mean, you're going to get through it, but you might not get through it. Might not be healthy, or I just like, don't know how you deal with stuff like that if you don't have, if a relationship with God. And so that's the biggest thing for me. It's like just going back to like, okay, it really is perspective more than anything.
Yeah, man. Beautifully said. Yeah. I think a lot of people when they're young in their faith walk, they'll be praying like, oh, let me get this win today. Let me get this win today. And then they lose and they're like, oh, you know what? Right. This isn't working. Yeah. But like it's proven like, that it does, and there's a deeper lesson that we need to learn inside of a loss too, whether it be a loss on the mat or a loss in our family.
For sure.
So, now let's get back on wrestling here. What do you, so future recruits, I know a lot of listeners are probably like, now they got their ears all open. They're like listening, waiting for this answer. What are you looking for as a coach when you look at, high school kids for recruiting?
I mean, obviously, the first thing we look at is, are they good? I think coaches don't say that. And it's
right.
true.
No, it's true.
You're lying, man.
100.
We like winners, so that helps. So that's the first thing is you're looking at success. And then usually the one of the first things we do is reach out to the coach and just ask him like, hey, what's this guy like? How are his grades? What's he like personality wise? And I actually really appreciate coaches that'll tell us like, he's probably not going to be a great fit, meaning he hasn't matured yet. He won't, he's not the type of guy you're looking for. And I know that maybe some coaches like struggle with that because you don't necessarily want to talk bad about a kid, but man, when we've had coaches kind of sell us on a guy that wasn't the right fit, it burns you a little bit because you're like, man, even if they would have told us, if we would have decided to take a chance on them, at least we would have known what we're getting into.
Sure.
You can prepare for that a little bit. So that's a big part of it. We want to know academically, how are they, what are they like socially, and then we bring them on campus and we tell these guys straight up that, hey, when you come, even though this is really like you trying to find out what the best fit is for you, we're doing the same thing. And so we talk about these things. We ask some questions and we talk about the championship lifestyle idea. And I tell every guy that comes, if you like that and that's something you want to buy into, you're going to love it here. But if that's not you and you just want to win and just do enough to get by in school, just don't come here. That's okay. Like we're not going to be upset. It's okay. And it's funny because especially the last few years, we've lost some guys, some recruits that I was like, at first I was like, man, that guy could have been a difference maker and has gone to some schools like that we compete against and you're upset. And then you just see how it plays out at those other places. And I would say 90% of the time, those guys we find out, because it'll be one of our guys will tell us after the fact, like, hey, coach, we didn't want that guy anyway. And we're like, oh, that's good to know. And then you see it and you're like, oh man, there's a good reason why we didn't get that guy. You know?
Yeah.
And sometimes they even end up, having some success, but you still know like how they live their life and what their lifestyle is about. And you're like, man, this isn't it. So that's a huge part of it.
Sure. Yeah. We see that in professional sports too.
For sure.
People that are like highly successful, but then they're like, getting arrested on the weekend for this or that,
Right.
So
Well, here's something with that I think is so key though. Like when you talk to, especially again, like with college guys is, they all kind of want a roadmap to follow to be successful. And sometimes you have to help them understand, like, you know what, there's some guys, they're going to win regardless of how they live. And the thing that you can't make the mistake of thinking like, well, I can live like that guy and still win.
Right.
Some guys are just better. Some guys are just, they have more talent. They have more natural ability. Or they just got better somewhere along the way. But just because they're winning doesn't mean you can live that way. And sometimes those guys are like culture killers. I've been on teams with guys like that, and I'm coached some guys like that they won, but they weren't doing it the right way. And there's always a few guys that are like, well, I'm gonna just live like him. And I'm like, dude, you're not as good as him. It doesn't even have to be somebody that's like making terrible life choices. There's some guys that by the time they get to us, they could just come to practice and that's about it, and they're still going to win. They're just that good.
Mm-hmm.
But then the guy that's like middle of the road that isn't there yet, he can be like, well, I see what Martinez is doing, and he just shows up to practice and he's still beating everybody. And I'm like, yeah, but you didn't see what he did in fourth grade.
Yeah.
Like this guy from 4th to 8th grade wrestled 1,000 matches. You didn't do that. And so it's almost like don't compare to where they are, because everything you did up to this point still matters. And so, and then again, it's he's winning, but how much better could he be?
Mm-hmm.
What if he was doing everything right? He couldn't just be a national champ. He could win the Midlands. He could win Reno. So there's the like constant talk about, just comparison is a trap sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope my high school listeners out there are paying attention and taking notes on this one. So, so outside of the wrestling room, you personally, like, what do you do with your free time? Do you have any free time do you play games? You watch movies?
Yeah. There's not a ton of free time. It's funny. A couple of years ago, we went in with our parents. We had a boat, and man, we were out like 2 summers ago. We were out a ton. Last year, we were out like half as much, and this year we're like, we need to get rid of it because we're not going to be out. And it's funny because I've like paid attention to how many times we could have been out there, and it would have been like 5 times, and I'm like, well, that definitely would have been a waste of money. So, you enjoy stuff like that, but right now it's a lot of it's just chasing the girls around, meaning my daughters, and and just like seeing what they're doing and following their events and taking them to stuff, and I like doing that. I love it. That's a big part of it. And so other than that, I like to golf, but I don't golf very much, and I'm pretty terrible right now. And so, we'll play in a few golf outings throughout the summer. And again, like you plan your travel this time of year. But yeah, realistically, other than that, once you get in, like school's about to start and it's go time, it's just going to be something you're just running most of the time.
It's interesting you said that about golf, because I'm terrible at golf. Like I can do anything. Like if you throw me a basketball right now, I'm good. You throw me a football, I'm good. Right. For some reason, like golf is never consistent for me. So right. I think that's why I like it so much as well.
I've gotten better at like reminding myself, like, hey, you shouldn't be good at this. You don't play enough, because I get mad at myself. And I used to be better. That's the thing, because I used to play, like when I was in Waverly, I played consistently, and I wasn't good, but I was like bogey golf,
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I just suck, and I'm like so mad sometimes. I'm like, what are you getting mad about? Like, you don't practice, like you just went like some dude. Just
how many swings did you do today, Nick?
Right, exactly. Like some guy just walk in the wrestling room and think he's gonna be good. And like the same thing with golf, And so I'm like, whatever, man. I'm just having fun.
Yeah, I noticed a big change in my game when I just got golf shoes.
Right. Exactly. For sure.
At least the long game got better.
Yeah.
I was talking to TJ Moe, and I had him on a couple episodes ago, and I was teasing him like he had 2 girls,
Yep.
And then you got 2 girls, and I was like, it's kind of a blessing, because like, being a coach, being a dad coach is not easy. There's a lot of lessons learned in there.
For sure.
And then imagine if you did have a son.
Yeah.
Right. where's your time to meet with him during wrestling season? You know,
sure.
you'd have to turn that over to another coach.
Yeah. I get that question a lot with the girls. Like, are they going to wrestle? And it's funny because they didn't have much interest. And then last year they both kind of started talking about it. So I took them in, just me, and like showed them some stuff. And so they both kind of say they're interested, and I probably need to like push it more to see if they want to do it. But I need to get them in, all right, that's fine. This is the club. You're going to go do this and go check it out and see if you're really interested. But I don't think that it's probably for them. They're not really, my oldest especially, she's not really wired like that. But it's funny, once they get going, you can kind of see like, oh, there might be a little something here.
Yeah.
But you're right though. The boy thing is funny. My assistant coach Reedy, he has one girl and two boys, and so he had a daughter first, and then a son, and then the third time he went to find out what they were having, and I was like, well, what do you have? And he's like, hey, what's that one thing that I've done twice now that you've never done? And I was like, you're having a boy, huh? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, man, come on.
Yeah, I had two girls to start off too. My daughter actually plays at Grandview. She plays soccer.
Oh, nice.
Over there. So, but I got lucky on the third try. So my son's still in the progress of doing his wrestling thing. So
that's cool.
So you're still in good shape as a 45-year-old man.
Yeah.
You're still wrestling with the boys at practice, I imagine.
I used to wrestle a lot. I mean, when I first started the program, I wrestled like every day, and some of that was we just didn't have as many partners, and plus I was younger, and
Sure.
And so I don't wrestle live. I did like for 1 minute yesterday, jumped in with somebody, but not a ton. And I'll do some like drilling stuff. Actually, like 2 years ago, I messed up my back real. I've had like some lower back stuff, and the one day it went out on me like in practice, and I had wrestled that day with our 41 pounder, who was a national champ this year. We wrestled for like an hour. It was stupid. He comes in, he's the guy that's like, hey, let's get a drill in, and the next thing you know, we're just wrestling.
Yeah. I'll go 20it%. You go 20%. We know how that goes.
We just went. And so like I was already tight, and then our 97 pounder, I was just showing him like a little dump, and it like clicked, and I was like crawled across the room. And so it's funny, a few years ago, my doctor, he was like, here's the thing, when you're working out, imagine there's a sign in front of you that says avoid injury. And at first I was like, man, you're old, don't tell me stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, he's right, because I love to work out and I love to be in good shape, but like when you get hurt and you're that injured, like you can't do anything, and then it takes so long to get back to it. So that's my goal now, is avoid injury. And so I'm a lot more selective about when I get on the mat, and I pay attention to like how I feel now.
Yeah, for sure. Like it doesn't get any easier. I train every day, but I just came off a broken rib too, and that's been a pain to recover from. But I didn't realize a broken rib was going to be that.
There's nothing you can do.
Yeah,
right?
there's nothing you can do,
like,
and it's miserable to do anything. So it's taken me several months to just try to like get comfortable. I've been rolling with light people, and working my way back up to the big boys again, because they all want some.
Yeah,
for
sure.
They all want to beat me.
That's the thing too, is right. And you want to like, all right, let's go. Just imagine I'm good.
I'm lucky that my sport's jiu-jitsu now, so I can kind of play the lazy game and set traps. I don't have to go as hard anymore.
Yeah, I mean, my wrestling has become like definitely old man wrestling. It's like just take me down and I just roll around, reverse and get on top.
I can scramble good, and I can Houdini my way out of this one.
That's right.
So since you're getting a little bit of training in yourself doing that, like how, I know that you got younger guys you bring on for staff that are Grandview folks, but like how are you still developing technique?
Yeah, so part of it is that, I mean, it's like our young coaches like make such a big difference on our staff, because those are the guys that like, number one, they kind of help you, like you kind of forget what it's like to train as a college athlete. And so we'll ask them like, hey, how are you feeling? What do you think? Like, should we go easy today? So we utilize guys in that way. Obviously these guys that come in, they've got their skill set. They have things that they're good at. So I try to, as much as I can, like in the room, you hear this a lot in wrestling. It's like, who runs practice or who runs the room? I'm the head coach, and so it's my job to run the room, but that doesn't mean I'm always showing technique. So it's making sure that like our young guys, our older guys, people that come in are showing technique. So that's a big part of it. And now there's so much access to technique.
Oh boy.
I mean, it's so much different than it used to be. And I don't even know if people appreciate like how much is out there where you can just get online now. I mean, I could learn something new in a minute, just watch something and pick something up, and then you kind of disseminate between, all right, what's good and what's actually worth showing.
What's probable and non-probable.
Right. Yeah. And again, because I'm into basics, sometimes I see stuff and, or even one of my coaches might say, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm like, just show that guy that individually. Let's not show the whole team, because all of a sudden then you've got 30 guys that aren't skilled enough that are like, oh, I'm going to try this. And you're like, nah, that's not for you. So that's part of it, I think, is like helping guys understand what's right for you and what's maybe let's go back to something more basic. Yeah.
Obviously wrestling has evolved since me and you have been on the mat actively, right. But like, where do you think wrestling is going technique wise? Like, how do you see it evolving and where do you see it going over the next like 5 years?
It's interesting because I feel like wrestling it's like fashion. It like goes in cycles.
Yeah.
You start seeing stuff that like I was talking about our 41 pounder earlier. Like when he first started wrestling for us, he was like arm barring people, like the old chicken wing. And I'm like, nobody was doing that, and then all of a sudden it's like, because people kind of got away from it, it worked better, because when people get away from something, they kind of forget how to defend it. It's funny, like think about like a tilt series. Like I remember maybe 8 years ago, we show like a cross wrist, like roll through tilt. And it was a little bit like, people thought it was more like, oh man, that's kind of dangerous, or it's more like a high level tilt. Everybody just did like a basic 2-on-1, like load them up tilt. Well, this year, it was funny. One day in practice, I was like, our whole team knew how to do this like cross wrist roll through tilt, but nobody had it, like hardly anybody knew how to do just a basic like 2-on-1, load them up in your hips tilt. And I'm like, I just thought everybody knew this, So it's so weird how that stuff goes. And I think the same thing with, scrambling. Like scrambling has, it's really evolved. But they put some good rules in college where there's like a danger rule now, where if you're break 90, so that's kind of changed how scrambling operates. And so again, I think it's back to like, solid fundamentals, clean finishes, we spend so much time on finishing clean because everybody's a good scrambler now. And I feel like, maybe that was something as I was coming up, maybe me and some of my friends that were like, had wrestled a lot, we had a good scramble ability, which meant just an ability to, if I was really beat, to not give up a takedown, where now, everybody knows like, hey, here's what's going to happen. It's weird how people can like script scrambling now because you know what it is.
Yeah.
And so many more coaches now are like teaching scrambling, where it used to be a scramble meant like you were just winging it basically.
Yeah.
Well, now it's like, it's playing scrambles and then it's playing beating a scramble. So it's crazy how it all works. I mean, but it's like, to me, that's like the fun part of it. It's just like preparing for who you're going to compete against. Teams have tendencies, obviously individuals have tendencies, and spending time like, okay, man, we're going to have to be prepared for this.
Sure. Yeah. Awesome. So, I want to get a couple, usually when I'm doing a show, I try to reach out to people, especially if they're people that know you, and allow them an opportunity to ask some questions.
Yeah.
So this first question's from Scott. He wants to know, how do you stay motivated each year winning titles? And how do you motivate the wrestlers?
I mean, as far as my side of it, staying motivated just isn't hard. I mean, I just want to win, but here's the thing is that, again, for me, it's not even like just winning is not the end point. Like, I just want to find out like how dominant can we be? Like, what's the best version of our team look like? And so part of that then with our team, to motivate them is thinking about like, again, we don't talk about winning championships hardly ever at Grandview. We really talk a lot about like, again, what's the best version of the team look like? And the example of that is this past year, we won nationals by like 50 points. Well, we tell our guys like, hey, winning by 50 is great, but if we would have won by 5, we still would have been the national champs.
Right.
And so if you win by 5 and you still get all the same stuff we got, you still get the title, you still get the trophy, you still get the banners, but winning by 5 is not good if you can win by 50. So that's the reminder for them individually too, is, hey, it's not just about winning. It's really about, was that your best performance? Because again, like you might major somebody, but what if you could have teched him? What if you could have, you can win the national title, but what if you can be the outstanding wrestler? What if you can, dominate all the way through? And so that's really like how I stay motivated. And again, I'm just super competitive anyway. And so that makes it easy to stay motivated, but it's also about like, it's the puzzle to me of the team. It's like, how do I help this guy who I know is struggling mentally right now? How do I get through to him? Like, that's the part that like really like lights me up, this guy, whatever, he's struggling technically, then that's the part. Okay, we need to work on this. But these guys that are struggling mentally, or this guy's struggling with his personal life, or he's struggling academically, I know that if we can break through on that, then he's going to have a breakthrough on the mat somewhere. And so that's the part that like, I love that chase of just dealing with the issues of each athlete individually.
Yeah, that's well put. I mean, I think most people that don't know you personally, don't have a chance to talk to you, would just assume that like the trophy at the end is the main thing. But I know that, as a coach, you want that other guy that may not get there, isn't predicted to get there, and he gets there.
For sure.
That's another goal, even though you're going to get the title anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of it, it's beating people you're not supposed to beat. Those are the things that you hang your hat on. It's, a guy overperforming, because like you said, at the end of the tournament, if you win, unless you win every match, there's still something that you're like, we could have got that. You know what I mean? I'm always like hung up on the ones that we didn't get, and you hurt for the guys that didn't accomplish their goals. And at the same time, every national tournament I've ever been to that we won, I'm already thinking about the following year. All right, what's this next team going to look like? Where do we need to get better? It's like, it kind of sucks because and that's probably something I've gotten better at, is like, hey, enjoy this, feel, and it's something we tell our guys after the season when we win is, hey, you can enjoy this and celebrate this and still get to work on everything else at the same time. It doesn't have to be like celebration time doesn't mean like, whoa, I'm not doing any, I'm not going to school. I'm just partying for the next couple of weeks. You can feel good and celebrate, still go to class, still do your job, still be a good dad. Still, that's the reminder of all those things. But again, like it took me a while to get to that part because I was doing all those things, but forgetting to celebrate, forgetting to feel good about the year, and again, like the year we lost actually helped me with that. So the last 2 years, we made sure, like our coaches, we're still working, but we make sure we get together and we do something fun and we celebrate winning.
Yeah,
so it's better.
Heck yeah. Here goes a great follow-on question for that. This question comes from Ryan. He wants to know, how much time do you recommend your team to take off during the off season? And if so, what do you recommend that they work on?
So I think that's part of it is again, like you kind of have to know your team and know some of the individuals, meaning like we get to the end of the collegiate season and we take 2 weeks off as a team before we start our freestyle and Greco stuff. Now there might be some guys that wrestled at nationals that I just know like, hey, you need to take an extra week. Like I just want you to take more time off. 2 weeks isn't going to be enough. And then there's guys that if they didn't wrestle at nationals, they might not have competed since February. And I'm like, we're going to take 2 weeks off as a team, but you could probably be in there. You probably need to get back in the room. Where some guys, I'm like, don't even come in the room. And so we take those 2 weeks off. We go through the freestyle and Greco season. That goes until like the first week of June. And then we take the full month of June off all the way. We don't do anything like as a program. And now we're back. We're just going 3 days a week right now. We're back to folk style. And I think the off season is really your best time to work on new skills. I think like too many times during the season, coaches make the mistake of like teaching a lot of new stuff. I think that's a mistake, and so for us,
do you think that's because they're learning new steps themselves and they're like, I want to pitch this?
I think sometimes it's that. I think it's that. And I think it's also like, they don't have clarity on like what the team needs.
Sure.
And so it's interesting for us. So like our first preseason chunk, like 6 weeks plus the next, like so we go 6 weeks of preseason and then we take a week off and then we have like another 4 weeks of official practice before we're competing. I've got like a 3-4 page list of stuff that I want to try to get through during that time. And you might consider it teaching, but it's mostly like fundamental stuff. but positions we think these guys should know, top, bottom, neutral positions. And I have a list of like concepts that they need to know as far as like do it anyway, do more, some things like that. But we try to get through that stuff. And once we get to season, we're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And it probably is monotonous. And sometimes the guys are like, oh man, we're going to work on shot defense again today, but that's what wins.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of our stuff during the season is based on what we see in competition. Oh, I mean, almost all of it is like we have individual stuff, and then we have team things that we see, and we go back and we hit that stuff over and over again. And then again in the off season, then it's like right now we're like, okay, we're working on maybe just some little more like new technique, or just trying to help them like expand on their arsenal a little bit. And again, they're not going to pick all of it up, but in the off season, realistically, if you can pick up one or two things that are like really go-to things, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And again, I think in wrestling, people think like you have to be good at 100 things.
Right.
You really don't. You just have to be good at a few things on your feet. You got to be able to get away, and you got to be good on top. And I think that's where we've been good, is we're good in all three positions. But yeah, so I mean, again, like time off is a little bit, probably depending on high school and college. High school, I'd say take more time off than college does. College guys, but even for us, like right now, it's 3 days a week, and our practices are maybe an hour and a half. I mean, they're not super long. So, and that's how we are during the season. I mean, we rarely go 2 hours. I mean, it's usually hour 45. So I'd rather be in high paced, keep it moving, and then individual drills, same 45 minutes maybe, and you come in and you work on skills, and then you get out. So they're just going to be enough like beating on their bodies. And I think you're seeing this a lot already, because kids are specializing probably too early. There's like overuse injuries and wrestlers that, I mean, rarely got hurt in junior high or high school. Maybe a tweak here or there, but these guys are having surgeries, or they're getting to college and they're having surgeries. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, it's because you didn't play any other sport, and you wrestled and you shot 6 billion singles with this shoulder from the time you were in second grade to college, and you wonder why there's no cartilage in there anymore.
Yeah. I don't think I got injured until I was out of high school.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing serious ever. And again, like maybe, there's a fine line in there somewhere to put more time in, and, and maybe put some work in, but I just don't think sometimes we give kids enough time to recover. And like, and that's a hard thing because as a parent, I'm seeing this right now with my 12-year-old. She plays competitive softball, and she's not the best one on the team. So sometimes you're like, your kid strikes out and you're like, I suck as a dad, and you don't, but it's like, it's sports, but it's also like, okay. I'm also seeing though, like some kids, that's all they do is this one sport. And then what happens like when they're freshmen in high school and they realize they don't really want to play this sport anymore? You have nothing else now.
Yeah. We see that a lot for sure.
And so, I mean, that's my thing with her is right now it's softball, it's cheer. She's doing volleyball, and she's asked she wants to run track. She wants to play tennis. I'm like, all right, let's do it, but at some point you're going to have to start. I think each year you kind of start as you get older, but maybe by your junior, senior year, it's like, okay, it's my one sport that I know I'm best at if I want to pursue it in college. If not, play a couple sports and then go to college, and nobody cares anyway. So
yeah. Well, that was, I think you probably hit that question right on the head for Ryan, because I know that he's got a son that wrestles, and he's sustained some injuries as well. So I'm pretty sure that is the best answer you could give him. Yeah. And it also helps answer a question for some of my jiu-jitsu students that are watching and listening in. We don't have to show a new technique every day. So drill the basics. Do what I tell you to do.
Right. For sure, man.
They're always looking at me like, we already did this.
Right.
I'm like, go drill. I'm giving you 20 minutes to work. Go do it,
That's such a funny thing. I mean, and it's kind of funny because I'm sure you work with all age levels, but even the oldest people will say, well, I already know this. Yeah. I'm like, do you really though? Like,
and then you just stand around there just looking at you like, are we going to do something different? Like, no.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And then you learn, I think, and this is a skill in itself, is like learning how to drill something, meaning like, okay, you're not going to give me any real resistance. I'm just going to drill this so I have the technique down. And now we kind of play. Like, give me a little feel so I can find, and that's a hard thing to do because you need a good partner to do that. But that whole feel thing of like, well, what happens if you come here and where's my adjustment, and so that's like really the people that excel is they learn how to do that. You go in and you don't have to go live, but you can play a little bit and you can call it sparring or play wrestling. Or
we call that flow rolling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just flow a little bit. And so those people, they would have more fun with it. If it's not, just don't drill it then. Like, all right, have your partner give you a little feel and then play in there a little bit.
And I always try to set the example. Like when I drill, I don't have a problem drilling. Nobody needs to tell me how to practice.
Right.
I can drill for like 20, 30 minutes straight and not be injured, hurt, and feel like I can get tons out of it. But
it's funny you say
some
that.
people don't get it.
And that's something funny that you say that because it's actually something I'm going to talk to my team about like today is you have to learn how to be like self-directed, in a way of like, you don't always need your coach to tell you what to do.
Exactly.
And some of it is, I need to know, like, I need a coach. I want somebody to tell me what to do. But if you and I just go in, I'm not like, well, what am I supposed to do? I was like, hey, let's just work here. And I might be like, yeah, this is a focus area of mine that I need to work on. Or it might just be like, yeah, we're just going to flow and we're going to play wrestle and get in, get a good workout and get out of here.
Yeah, whenever I did that last night, and everybody kind of looked at me like, does he not prepare to have a class today?
Right.
Like, no, I want you guys to train. Go train. You've been with me for 3-4 years. You should already know how to do this without me here.
And really, they should probably love days like that because it's not them being told what to do all the time.
Yep.
You get that freedom of like, and so that's a balance for us too, because we have some high school kids that come in and if their program is super structured, coach always tells them what to do. Sometimes those guys struggle a little bit with that part of it. They're like, I need to tell them what time to come in and what time to do their extra drill. But the kids have a little bit more freedom when they come in. They come in and they're like, okay, coach isn't here, but here's what we're going to do today. Just kind of, get a feel. So that's key.
Awesome. This next question comes from Brian, and I think this is more geared towards younger wrestlers, like youth wrestlers. He's like, basically, how do you keep those youth wrestlers interested?
It's got to be fun. I mean, that's it. It has to be fun. So we have a youth and high school club at Grandview, but we started this thing called the Little Vikes, and it's like for little kids. And when we decided to start it, I told those guys, like, here's the thing, man, like, this is fun. We want to teach them some fundamentals, but I don't want to like give those kids a freaking popsicle when they leave and like just play games and make them associate fun with wrestling. Yeah. And so
fun's a part of focus.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Right. And so I think that, again, we make this mistake and maybe it's like the part of the country we live in.
It's Iowa.
It is. A lot of times is like, oh, we have to like, we're going to condition. Like, dude, until you got into like high school, do you ever remember being tired in a wrestling match? Like you don't need to condition middle school, elementary.
Shoot.
Kids.
And I remember that, when we'd see each other at wrestling tournaments, it would be like, these kids are running around the place and they're like, then they go do their match and they're back to running around chasing each other. Like they never run out of gas, You
didn't pay attention to what you're eating. You didn't have like eating like a egg McMuffin in the morning or something and go wrestle. It didn't matter. And so again, we're like, we mess up and do the wrong things. And so I think that part, I think the other big mistake we make is we compete way too much when we're young.
Sure.
And you look at like, the Russians, they have like a whole protocol of like, when they compete and how much they compete. And a lot of it is more about like, you don't compete rarely until you get older. And they spend time on like gymnastics and body awareness, drilling, learning things the right way. Cause again, like I think like these young kids, a lot of times they go compete, and especially if you're just getting into it and then you wrestle a guy that's like, he's way better. And then you get your butt kicked and you're like, well, that sucks. I don't want to do this again, so hold them back, And again, like I competed a lot early on, but I don't know if it was the best thing for me, even though I wanted to, and I didn't even get pushed to it. Maybe if my parents would have been like, no, we're not going this weekend, maybe it would have held me back a little bit because I did get wrapped up too much in like winning and losing and, winning a state title. And like it really matters if you win a AAU state title, in 6th grade. And all of a sudden you get beat by the guy with 2 different shoes in 4th grade. And then all of a sudden you have an expectation of winning a state title is going to be really hard. It's a big deal. You put it on a pedestal, and it makes it, it's all, it changed everything where maybe when he wrestled there, maybe, you don't know, but all of a sudden maybe that thing would have helped me just be like more calm when it came time to a quote unquote big match. So I think make it fun. Don't overtrain them. Make sure they play other sports, and just trust that like it's funny. Just this past year, Steve Mocco had a son that either All-American or was a national champ in Fargo. Doug Schwab's kid just won a Greco title, but he also like did real well in freestyle. And these are two guys like, and throwing Nelson Brands. Nelson Brands, obviously son of a Brands brother. Like Doug Schwab and the Brands brothers are like some of the most intense people we know. Mm-hmm. Nelson Brands wasn't that good in high school until like his senior year. If you look back at like and I don't have any idea what he did in like junior high,
right?
But he developed, but they trusted the process. The same thing with Schwab's oldest kid. I know for a while there in elementary and middle school, he was doing okay, but he wasn't winning he wasn't winning Tulsa. You know?
Right.
But these guys, they held him back. They trusted the process and let him like, what do they do? These guys are in gymnastics. They do other sports. They're around wrestling a lot, but they weren't training to win Tulsa in 4th grade. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong. Like some kids are, I mean, I have friends that's what they do and that's how they train, and hopefully it works out for them. I'm just not saying that you don't have to do that. If your kid is not the best right now, just give it time. I mean, half of youth sports is like who hits puberty first. You know, it's like who's stronger, who's more developed. I mean, it's not like, yeah, there's some, obviously skill is important, but be patient and don't take it as a reflection of you. Don't take it on as a reflection of who you are as a parent. It's hard to do that. You know, my daughter drops a pop fly. I'm like, we got to work on pop flies.
Yep, we're going to do 100 of those
right.
after practice.
Yeah. And it's like, well, if she doesn't want to, then I'm not going to do it. So that's so key.
So much to be said. We could probably do a whole hour just on this topic for both the athlete and the parent.
Yep, 100%.
So, yeah, I would agree. My son, he does wrestling and jiu-jitsu, and he was kind of, I watch him when he goes against really strong, tough wrestlers, and he has some of those struggles with getting his, dealing with the nerves and anxiety, the kid with the 2 different colored shoes. Yeah. But then when he's in jiu-jitsu, he can just destroy those people. Right. And I'm like, what's the difference? He goes, because I'm completely relaxed when I'm doing jiu-jitsu. And I'm like,
there you go.
Then we just have to apply that to the wrestling now. Yeah, but, as a dad coach, I've learned how to just sit back. And now he's in high school, so now I can really sit back and just be a fan.
Does he listen to you when it comes to stuff like that?
Of course. Yeah. Me and him connect. That's like good. Nothing else, But I stay out of the coach's way and let them do their thing with them. So, and it's made our relationship way better and easier to deal with, like, to get home after a meet or a tournament, and just accept the wins as a win and the losses as lessons learned. So this next question comes from Tanner. He wants to know, how do you deal with anxiety before a competition? And that can be for both sides. As an athlete, how do you deal with nerves and anxiety, and how do you deal with that as a coach? And what would you recommend that people do pre-competition to, get better and improve in their anxiety?
Yeah. So I'll say the coaching part quick, because it's gotten a little bit easier, but like, part of it is like, if my family's not there, I have like pictures on my phone, just of my family. And it's like, dude, when you're stressed and like super tense about what's going to happen, you look at those pictures and you're like, okay, this is a lot more important. This isn't, you know what I mean? And so to me, that's just an easy, like, I just fall to that. I'm like, okay, this is not that big of a deal. These girls are going to still love me when I get home, whether we win or lose. And so that's an easy one for me. As an athlete, it's tougher. And I think some of it goes back to like some of that visualization, visualizing not just the match itself, but like pre-match, and paying attention to how do you feel, what are you telling yourself? What are the things you're going to say? Like you prepare in advance for what's going to happen when you get there. And then talking to them about things they can do just physically that can help, whether it's like, hey, take it, like really focus on your breathing. Like when I get tense, I can feel it in my shoulders and my chest. And it's like, just blow that out and like relax and, and then like look up in the crowd and like check it out and try to remind yourself like to be grateful. It's hard to be, maybe impossible to be like grateful and nervous at the same time, and maybe a little bit, but like that feeling of real tense and anxious versus, man, I'm so glad I get to do this. And so if you can like talk to yourself, and that's another thing we tell our guys, like talk to yourself, don't listen to yourself. And that's pre-match, that's during, when you're training, you know, when things are hard, what are you telling yourself versus what are you listening to, you know?
Right.
And so that's a big part of it. So if it's, man, I'm so glad I get to do this. I can't wait for this. Like, I'm excited about this, you know, and look forward to it in advance. And you think, like for us, we have 2 weeks between the conference tournament and the national tournament. And, you know, for some guys, dude, that tension can build up in those 2 weeks so that by the time you get there, it's like you're exhausted, you know? And so it's like, you know, in those 2 weeks, like, remind yourself, like, dude, I can't wait. This is going to be fun. And so there's different, you think about, we use the word anxious, and usually that's like a negative, you know, I'm so anxious about this. But what about when you're a little kid and Christmas was coming? You were so anxious to open your gifts. I just can't wait. Santa's coming, you know.
Can I get one gift tonight?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Do one before Christmas?
Right,
Yeah.
and so, you know, and then, you know, we remind our guys things like, hey, don't, just understand, like, you're prepared now. Like, it doesn't matter, like, the tournament's in 2 weeks, but we could wrestle tomorrow and you're ready to go.
Yeah.
You know, and so just like understand, like, we'll get better in this 2 weeks, but you're good to go right now, you know? And so I think talking through some things like that, you know, but it's such a process. And then of course for us throughout the season, this is so important, like making sure you approach the match the same every single time. And so, for us, it's not about outcome. It's all about performance, but you remind the guys this every time, like, hey, here's the goal. Go out and outfight this guy and let winning take care of itself. And this match right now, this next match is the most important match of the year.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's the next one. And so sometimes we'll go into a duel, we'll travel someplace, and, you know, the team is terrible, and there's like 8 fans in the stands. It's like a terrible environment. And I'll pull those guys in and be like, hey, man, this is the most important match of the year. Like, this is a big deal. Make this a big deal, meaning it's everything's important, but nothing special, you know? And so you go into it with that same mindset and remind them, like, approach this match the same way you're going to approach when you go to the national tournament. Not because the national tournament's bigger, but because when you go to that tournament, you're going to approach that the same way you approach this match. You know this guy's not very good. You could probably walk out there with your shoes tied together and still beat him, but have the same mindset going out as you do when you walk up on the stage for the finals. And then when you go to the finals, it's the same thing. You're like, you know what? I'm just going to go out. I'm going to go as hard as I can and let winning take care of itself. And then it's like, you're not putting anything on a pedestal. You know, everything is the same every time. And so if you can get good at that, like making, you know, the same approach, the same warm-up routine, you got to create routine, I think is key too. The same routine, the same approach, you tell yourself the same things, you eat the same things, you know, you focus on the same goal, which is fight, go hard, let winning take care of itself. And then it's like, well, now I'm just focusing on controllables. I'm not worried about like what this guy's ranked or who the official is or what's at stake or any of those things. Then that can take the pressure off. So those are all like, I mean, and there's a lot of that, you know, it's every single time, and you practice it throughout the season, and then hopefully you get to a point where you're like, man, I'm gonna do what I can and trust the outcome, and we'll just see what happens.
Wow. We should probably just like end the podcast right now. Like that's the great the words of wisdom there. But man, I hope everybody got that one. Write it down. So we're going to go to this last person here. Dustin has a question. He wants to know, is it hard competing with Division 1, 2, and 3 schools when it comes to competing with recruits?
With Division 1, yes. You know, I mean, of course it is. And it's funny because when I took the job at Grandview, I had competed at a Division 3 school. I coached at a Division 3 school. And at that point, NAIA programs didn't really have a great reputation in Iowa. Part of that was just because we didn't really have any programs that were real successful. And the other thing is, in Iowa, you've got these Iowa Conference schools, and they've been around a long time, and a lot of those people were competing or were coaching, you know, throughout the state. And so it was kind of a familiarity thing. So that was one of the things that I've really taken pride in, is like kind of changing the perspective of what people think about NAIA wrestling.
Yeah.
I think that's been really important for me and for our program. And, you know, and realistically, when you boil it down, small college wrestling is pretty similar across the board, you know, and I mean, I could argue that NAI is better, or, you know, people might say D2, or, you know, of course the D3 guys are going to say they're deeper. And, but realistically, wrestling's wrestling,
yeah.
you know? And so my big thing was, okay, regardless of, Division 1, NAI, Division 2, Division 3, we want to put ourselves in a situation where if you come here, you don't feel like you're settling for anything. And so it's been a huge reason why we train the way we do. It's a big reason why we've competed the way we do. It's, you know, meaning like the tournaments we go to, the schools that we try to compete against. We just try to do everything that give the guys an experience that even though you're at a small school, you feel like you still have a big time experience. So that was part of like our wrestling room. You know, that's one of the things we talk about is our wrestling facility is kind of an example of how we do wrestling at Grandview. We're a small school, but we've got the best wrestling room in the state, you know, so it's, you can have the best here. And of course, like when you're talking about the Division I thing, man, some guys that's just what their goal is. And that was kind of their dream, and that's what they want to do. And that's fine if that's really what they want. But you have to remember the Division I national tournament is 3 days of the year. And sometimes the question is, what are the other 362 days of your life that year going to be like, you know? Yeah. And so that's something we feel like we can provide where, if you come to Grandview, you're not wrestling for a Division I championship, but if you feel like you've got coaches that really care about you, you feel like you're in a place that like is supporting you and is going to help you be better in every part of your life, maybe that's the better option, you know? And it's funny, we've got this wall in our conference room, and it's like pictures of guys like wrestling or winning matches. And you see some guys like celebrating after winning titles. And I'm like, do you think that guy right there is thinking like, I wish I was wrestling Division I?
Right.
You know, he's just like,
right.
I met a goal, man. I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. And so at the end of the day, a lot of times the Division I thing can be ego. You know, sometimes it can be a parent's dream. And sometimes it's just what they want, you know, and that's okay. And, you know, if a kid tells me that's his goal, I always tell him like, hey, that's good for you, dude. Good luck. And if it doesn't work out or it's not where you want to be, you find out later on down the road, then we'll be here, you know. And we've had a ton of guys that have come back to us after that. So if we can provide a good experience for them, that's the most important thing. But it's very interesting. Like if you look at the country, like say out east, there's hardly any NAIA programs. There's a lot of Division III programs. And so for me to recruit those guys is pretty tough. But if you look out west, like we get a lot of kids from California, from the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, Idaho. Those kids, like they would choose NAI over Division III all the time. But it's just familiarity, you know, because if I was coaching at Wartburg still, it'd be funny to me, like those kids wouldn't be interested in us because we were good, you know? So it's really, again, it's wrestling's wrestling, you know? And so that's the way we approach it. And it's like, dude, when it comes time to compete, I don't care where the guy's from anyway. You know, we're going to look at the same approach, same concept. You don't wrestle the singlet, you don't wrestle the division. So that part's been fun though. I really am proud of like our division has grown so much. I mean, we're actually bigger than Division II right now. We've got, I think, 75 teams next year. And just the idea of what NAI wrestling stands for has really changed a lot too. So it's been cool.
Awesome. Well, we're about out of time here. I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we're sitting across from each other finally after all these years. I've been trying to get this rematch.
I'm out, man. No
I'm out of here.
I'm not happening. It's not happening.
I'm so grateful that you're here, and I know this episode is gonna be one of the favorites, just because not just because of who you are, but what you've said today. There's a lot of things can be taken away that I know that it will improve the community. A lot of parents will be listening in. A lot of coaches will be taking your words of advice. A lot of athletes, I think, will grow in their confidence because of what was said today. So I appreciate you. I love you.
Yeah.
God bless. And I wish you the best luck for this next season.
You, man.